Getting the smile and confidence you've been dreaming about, all from the comfort of your home, isn't a total mystery with Bite clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all your friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Richard Waters. He is a writer, director, and editor for films such as In a Stranger's House. Welcome to the show, Richard. I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm so happy to be with you guys.
And everyone, In a Stranger's House has found footage, so get the fuck ready for whatever is about to happen between me and like, it's just get ready. Just
the only true horror genre, really, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, that's it. We're starting off on a high here.
I was going to say, we're just like, we're going.
We're starting off with a hot take and we're just fucking going for it.
Well, before we do get to that hot take, though, let's take it all the way back. How did you get introduced to horror, Richard?
Yeah, I think it's just, well, probably too much TV, but no, I was always fascinated by when you see any movies with like kind of creature effects or anything like that, that always kind of drew me in. And I think I'm the youngest in my family, so in particular, my brother was quite big into sci-fi stuff, and I know he hates it when I say it, but I think he's the one who really introduced me to horror stuff.
That's what older brothers are for.
That's it. Like, but as well, like my sister, I remember she was obsessed with Aliens and would watch it probably every day for, that probably went on for about a year.
Oh my God.
I mean, I must have been about 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that when that was going on. And I mean, I definitely saw the other ones around the same time. I was just always kind of really drawn in by mainly the creature effect and things like that, you know. Those ones led on to things like Poltergeist and Gremlins and, you know, the real kind of cool kind of 80s ones. Because at that time, even at that point, it all felt like they were kind of slightly in the past. They were slightly kind of beyond what I was used to. So it was just something about that kind of slightly unknown, that kind of removed stage for me. And I just kind of kept chasing them up, you know. I mean, we'd have our Friday night movie rentals and I'd always be trying to get the kind of weirdest things I could. Now, I mean, again, being the youngest, I didn't exactly get, you know, my say all the times. And our video store was, you know, like a little mom and pop one, but I got as much as I could.
So you kind of touched on something that like, oh, this is a question that we should be talking to people about. What was your favorite subgenre as a kid? Was it creature features? Because it kind of sounds like that's what kind of drew you in.
Yeah, I kind of think I look at it like I was definitely obsessed with Ghostbusters and Gremlins when I was a kid. And I mean, even now, like I'm pretty still mad obsessed with them. And it's just definitely down to, you just look at these things, especially because they're physical, you know, it feels like it could be something, especially when you're a kid, it's easier to suspend your disbelief and go, you know, shit, that's something here. Like, is that thing going to be exploding in my microwave?
Well, and like, I think also, I don't know what era or what decade you were growing up in, but I mean, back in like the 80s and 90s, a lot of the creatures were actually there, as opposed to now where a lot of them are added in after the effect. And
Yeah.
I do think as a kid, there's that tangible quality that you get.
Oh, totally. Like, and I mean, even now, if I look back on some of the films from, like, I was born in '88, so I kind of, I guess the early '90s, mid '90s was kind of a real formative time for me.
Right.
Seeing some of the effects then, just kind of before CG was really accessible to a lot of places, you still had a lot of kind of dodgy puppetry and all. But even now, like, I'd still take a kind of a dodgy puppet effect than I would over a CG effect if I can help it.
Me too. Any day.
Oh, yeah, I even just think back, like, probably around that time was probably like X-Files was mad, like, around the place as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember, like, I can't remember if they did it. I think they probably did physically. They had this one episode where some kind of stretchy dude who, like, he like stretched down someone's chimney and stuff like that. And things like that, they were just all so visceral, I mean, especially for a kid, it kind of really plays in your imagination. It feels so much more real, like even if it's a bad effect, even if it's just some physical effect in some way, it just really plays on you so well.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be digging into that, I think, a little bit more later with the movie shows. Do you remember what your first horror movie experience was?
I'm not too sure if I can remember my first. I mean, there's a few that I can kind of think of that must have come around the same time. Because I mean, when you're a kid, like, I mean, it all might have happened within like 2 months, but it feels like it was 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I say, I remember my sister watching Aliens a lot. And I mean, that's more actiony. And even as a kid, I was never scared by that. But I remember then seeing like Alien, and that one, because it was a bit slower and all, definitely had a bit more tension to it. And that one kind of got under me a bit. But it was a lot of things that kind of really got under my skin, or like kind of really stuck with me, was things that weren't so horror orientated. And it's even now, like, you look at some of these things, like, do you ever see, actually, I think you guys had an episode on it, was Ernest Scared Stupid. I remember that, like, terrifying.
Oh, we haven't done an episode on that yet.
We haven't done it yet, but it is on our list. It's on our to be talked about list. There's someone that wants to talk about it.
Oh shit! Just ignore me. Ignore the man behind the curtain.
No, I mean, the list is public out there on my letterbox. But yeah, no, it's something that we are going to be talking about.
But Ernest Scared Stupid, and even I think I rewatched it when I was in college, and I mean, it's an Ernest movie, but at the same time, it is a kind of vicious. The fact that it's just like these kids are turned into these little statuettes kind of out of nowhere. It's like pretty grisly stuff for a kid.
Have you seen it, Mary Beth?
I have not, actually.
Oh, you're going to be in for a treat when we watch it. It's so goopy. From what I remember, it's so goopy.
But even things like a lot of films that were kind of kid orientated or kind of easygoing or family films, like, do you remember Look Who's Talking 2? There's like this one scene where like the two kids are talking about like they get toilet training, and one of them's a bit scared of the toilet, and he's like, what's it like, was it Mr. BPL, like, bite your tuchus off?
Oh, yes, I do remember that.
And I mean, I think I shared probably a stupid amount on Twitter. It's just, I think it's Mel Brooks doing the voice of like this talking toilet, and it is horrifying. And I just remember as a kid, like, I'd walk by like the toilet in my house, you'd look in and you'd just be worried, like, is that going to start talking at me? Ugh.
Well, it's funny because, like, I do think that the movies that are like not explicitly horror but have that one horrific scene in it are sometimes more effective than horror because you're not expecting it. Why would you expect something horrific in a talking babies movie? Isn't that kind of what that was about?
Yeah, that's exactly
like Look at Talking too. Like, isn't that kind of like
Roseanne? Like,
yeah, like why would you expect there to be something horror in there?
That's it. And even just,
you said talking babies though, and that freaks me out. Even like,
I mean, they like, it's like you're hearing their thoughts, right? Isn't that? Or
yeah, that's it.
It's been so long.
I don't care. That shit's wacky. Anyway.
That's it. Like, what could kids say? They just don't have the facilities to talk to us. They'd smack us around if they had the chance.
I don't want to know what's on their minds.
But as well, like, when I was a kid, like, we had like the just the TV aerial that kind of picked up kind of 2 local stations, and then we kind of got in some of the stations from the UK. There was, I think, 4 or 5 channels, but they came in all mad scrambled. There'd be massive distortion. You'd barely be able to make out what was on it.
Yeah,
I can't remember who told me, but someone told me about this film Candyman, and the big thing that I took away from it was like, he gives them candy with razor blades in it. And I remember seeing, like, we tried to watch, we had to give up on it because it was so shit signal, but I remember watching it and like coming across that scene, and because of how distorted and ugly the channel was, it was really hard to make out what was going on. But it's just like, I think that's a razor blade beside a piece of chocolate. And, I mean, obviously now you look at that film, that's like really a very inconsequential part of the entire film. But I mean, that kind of thing just really gets into, I mean, like, maybe that's part of my love of like things like found footage and all, is that kind of grittiness, that kind of, I'm not too sure what I'm looking at. If things are too clear, it's kind of too easy to kind of see the seams on things.
Yeah. And so now, as an adult, what draws you to horror now?
I think for me, like, I love a good story. I mean, I've always thought horror is kind of modern day fairy tales or like modern day fables in a lot of ways, you know? I mean, it's a good kind of way of looking at morality, putting people in challenges that maybe they wouldn't face every day or in day to day life, and seeing what way they'd react to it. And, you know, I mean, on everyday life, you know, you can examine it in a lot of ways, but the second you put someone in some sort of peril, you know, an awful lot of the guises have to drop down. You kind of see who someone really is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
When anyone has some sort of, like, even an emergency in your life, or, you know, something you have to kind of have the adrenaline rush through your body, you know, I mean, you learn an awful lot about yourself in those times, you know. Are you someone who's going to, like, you know, jump up and spring to action? Are you going to be someone who, like, you know, curls away or runs away from things, you know? Are you going to be someone who is kind-hearted? Are you going to be someone who's horrible? I think films do a great job of kind of examining that. And, like, say something like, I'm a huge fan of George Romero's Day of the Dead, and I love the fact that all the characters in that are just these flawed people. I don't think there's a single character in that who has a kind of a good motivation for things. And I mean, that's the best part, is like, there's so many movies that kind of really play things as, you know, black and white. Whereas everything is just about the grays, you know. Everyone knows that, like, you know, a good villain is someone who has a motivation that they truly believe in.
Mm-hmm.
What was the film? Was it Black Panther? The villain, it was Black Panther. The villain in that, like, I remember watching that thinking, like, you know, he has a very good point. You know, I mean, maybe the film should be kind of looking a little bit at the fact that we should be getting behind him a bit more.
Yeah, you know, that was one of the first Marvel movies that I saw, and I saw the villain and was like, oh, this is doing something different than the traditional Marvel villain. I mean,
that was really the first Marvel movie that you saw?
Me? No. It's the first one that I saw that, like, had, like, a villain that...
Sorry, I was like, damn.
No, it was the first one I saw that actually had a villain that was, like, doing something different than, like, the typical Marvel villain role, where, like, they try to give him these grandiose plans and try to make him seem like, well, maybe they're kind of like they have a point, but, like, that was the first, and to be honest, the only time I've seen a Marvel movie where I thought that. I was like, oh, this is actually a little bit morally gray.
Yeah. And they don't really resolve it in any way, you know. I mean, they just kind of push it towards that he's the bad guy towards the end, but at the same time, they never really resolve the fact that he did have a very strong point. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of things that... back to the question. In horror, like, that's the kind of thing that just really kind of fascinates me. It's kind of one of those genres that really allows you to open it up and put people in ugly places. I mean, you look at things like The Witch, where, you know, I mean, I guess it's ugly from the outside with the family, but when the child disappears, just the way that they really start hammering down, you know, you see how the religion is brought out and really kind of persecutes the daughter and all.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. It's just, I think they really kind of force you to kind of look inwards on yourself, you know, maybe ask questions that are uncomfortable to ask, but ask them in ways that feel safe to ask them.
Yeah.
You know, I do a lot of writing and things like that. And, you know, you're always kind of trying to find these parts of your brain that's kind of look into something that's maybe you maybe wouldn't want to look into otherwise. You know, I mean, especially if you're writing horror things, you're going to look at horror elements. You're going to look at the kind of darker side of things. Most screenwriters will say, like, you know, if anyone ever looks up their search history, they're screwed. But it's just that kind of thing. It's really trying to get into the meat of the human condition, you know? And I think horror is probably the only one that really does. I mean, sci-fi can do a very good job of it as well, but, you know, the best sci-fi tends to be sci-fi horror as well. So
I agree with you there.
So, you know, watching horror movies now as an adult, do you ever still feel that childhood fear in watching those kinds of movies?
It's very rare. And I mean, like, you know, I mean, we're all probably still chasing that dragon. Every now and again, though, like, you know, some films will really get me, like, and sometimes there'll be stupid little things that'll get me, like, Digging Up the Marrow, like the Adam Green film.
Oh my God. I love Digging Up the Marrow.
I know, it's absolutely great. And I've seen it so many times. Like, I saw it on a big screen. I've got the Blu-ray. I've seen it. I watched it on streaming. I've seen it so many times. But there's this one scene where they're just standing there talking in the forest, and then this little, or in the park or whatever, and this one of the monsters just like runs by at their feet. And I don't know what it is, but every single time that just gets me. It just sends me off the deep end. But things like, I mean, I definitely know the kind of things that freak me out. I'm definitely a sort of a paranormal person. Like, paranormal things kind of freak me out a lot more. Like, I'm not, a slasher thing doesn't set me on edge at all. Say something like, I'd go to Fright Fest an awful lot because, like, you know, seeing films in an atmosphere of people like that and on a big screen is a very immersive experience, which is what you want with horror. An awful lot of times you're kind of shocked at the amount of things that don't really kind of get you. But then every now and again, something will get you. I'm leading up to saying it, and I've forgotten the name of the film, but it's the Argentinian film. It's on Shudder.
Terrified.
That is it. That set me off so badly. Like,
yes.
Just watching it, and, like, you know, immediately at the beginning when you're just hearing the thumping, when you see what the thumping is, like, just from that moment, the entire film had me, like, all the way. And so I guess when a film, like, it's so unpredictable, like, Yeah, like, especially when you're writing movies and all that, and if you're presumably if you critique them, you probably see the patterns and story and all that an awful lot too. But it can be hard to get immersed in it.
So, okay, I have a question, and this is something I just thought of because I did this recently. So I don't usually watch horror movies like in the dark with headphones on. I'm usually watching them, on my TV, or I'm watching them on my laptop with the lights on. Do you how do you guys, and then like recently I watched a movie with the lights off and my noise canceling headphones on, and I almost shit my pants. Like, it's like a whole other experience. I mean, the movie was also really tense, but it was like a whole other experience. And I'm wondering how you guys usually watch horror movies, and if like that kind of adjustment from in the dark with headphones on is like also kind of changes the experience for you.
For me, absolutely. That's how I watch all my movies anymore.
Okay.
Whether it's like if I have like a screener that I have to plug my laptop into my TV for, I will do that. But I will watch. I have to. I have to watch it on my TV. And recently, I've been using noise canceling headphones.
Can you connect your headphones? This is like it's just a stupid question. So you can connect your headphones to the TV? I'm dumb.
Yes, if with like Apple TV. It has like Bluetooth in it, so like I connect it, so like I stream everything through my Apple TV, or if I'm using my laptop, I can just do the HDMI out to my TV and then connect my headphones to my laptop, so the sound's coming out of there.
The future is here.
The future is here. What about you, Richard? Do you?
Yeah, normally I'll try and watch it on a TV or whatever, but my wife wouldn't be hugely into watching horror films, and also has to wake up early for work an awful lot, so I'll find myself on the phone with the headphones in, under the cover. It's really like, you always hear about kids like with a book.
Yeah. Oh, on the phone, man.
Listen,
that's even better.
Hold the phone up right against 2 inches from your face. It's like you're in a big screen. I'm telling you.
Oh my
David
God.
Lynch, he would not have a problem with this.
No, that's how Christopher Nolan wants us all to watch Tenet.
That's it. But like recently as well, like, and found footage is really good for this kind of thing, because like that kind of jumpy footage really comes on mobile media and all that an awful lot. I watched Host on my phone.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't think like I was going to think too much of it, but I just put it on, headphones in, under the covers, and holy shit, oh my God. I'm shocked I didn't like scream the house down and wake everyone up. It was absolutely terrifying. The best way to watch it though, I guess you've got like, it's real sensory deprivation, you can't, your hearing's blocked off with just the film, your sight's blocked off by all your blankets and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. So moving into the creative stuff, and at this point, I just feel like, Mary Beth, you want to take over?
Yeah. Well, before we dive into found footage, and I know you've done other work, but I'm probably just gonna pick your mind about found footage, Richard.
That's okay.
Can you tell our listeners what In a Stranger's House is about?
Yeah, so In a Stranger's House is... Okay, so listen, there was this footage and broken camera that was found in this recycling centre in Ireland a couple of years ago, and the people got it, they got the footage together, and we went like, Jesus, that guy looks an awful lot like me. So it was of this guy who was house sitting. It answers a classifieds ad to house sit, and while he's house sitting the place, strange things start to happen. As these things do, things get spooky.
They sure fucking do.
I'm absolutely terrible at log lines, but I think that probably nails it.
No, that nails it, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I know that you've directed other films that aren't found footage. So what drew you to creating a film in this using this technique?
Well, I've been mad into found footage forever. I've always been a fan of things like Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity and Cloverfield and or even back to Cannibal Holocaust and stuff. So it was never something that I didn't not want to do. But does that work double negative? Anyway, more what came in was I'd done my creative aspirations or whatever, I guess, are kind of, they're just kind of bizarre in a way. I started off by producing a kind of David Lynch in Ireland kind of feature film that, as a David Lynch in Ireland feature film, got no attention really. But the star of that made a rom-com that she asked me and my at that time partner to help out on, and then I ended up taking over as director on that, and that became that went quite successful for us to a degree. I say it was on airlines and stuff like that, and we got invited over to America to a few festivals, which was more than we could have kind of wanted for it. So it was just a cool ride. I remember the guy who directed Sodium Party, which is the David Lynch-esque feature we did. Said to me that this rom-com is probably what people are going to think of when they think of you now in terms of your filmography. And I was just like, ugh, I don't know if I want that. like I don't have a thing against the film or whatever, but it's not really a representation of me, you know?
Right.
So I was always trying to get things off the ground, and there was a lot of false starts, a lot of dead ends, like as things are with this industry, an awful lot of people leading you down ways that just kind of go nowhere and waste your time more than anything else. And then I was doing helping a friend out by directing a little kind of TV pilot teaser for them. And I just had this absolutely horrendous experience with one of the other crew members on it. And it just kind of broke me a little bit. I just the want to make films with other people in that kind of way just really went away. Because I mean, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort to do these things. I just kind of felt broken. I kind of shied away from it. I lost my confidence with it all. But then it was definitely around September time. I was genuinely house sitting in that house that's in a stranger's house. And I had the camera, and I just thought and I mean, that's my family house in the film. And it's, it's not set dressed. I mean, that's kind of as the house comes along, you know? So say those creepy dolls that are in, and I know a lot of people kind of latch onto the creepy doll. I mean, that's been what's in that house all the way through.
That is what I latched onto, because let me tell you, I was, when I was watching it, I messaged Mary Beth, and I was like, the thing I do like about found footage when it's something like this is that if the person on screen is charismatic and does things that I would do, it's really effective to pull you in. And so when the character turns around and sees the doll, and the first thing out of his mouth is "fuck off," I was like, "This is me. Thank you. I am sold. Whatever else you're gonna do in this movie, I am on board with it."
I know, exactly. I was like, okay, cool. We're all on the same wavelength here. Fuck off. Knee-jerk reaction, and it's just
that
telling
would be
you
my response.
Off.
If I turn around and there's a creepy little doll staring at me, that would be literally the words that came out of my mouth.
Fuck off.
But that's it. I mean, that was the first thing I actually filmed for the film. Was I got in my head to try this thing, and I think about a year before I'd done something similar because I was house sitting at that time as well. And the thing I did then was absolute shit. I never put it up anywhere or anything because it was absolutely atrocious. But I did this thing, and I went that actually worked as well as I could kind of want, and it was kind of fun to do. And I just kind of brainstormed with myself, kind of came up with some ideas, and I decided to set myself this challenge of I can make this film now. I can make a film in this house using the skills I have, making the kind of film that I would like to see and like to enjoy and kind of get immersed in. And I think at that time I'd probably seen Creep. I'd definitely seen Willow Creek.
Oh,
and
okay.
I love that kind of real kind of found footage style. I think for me, my favorite kind of found footage is the ones that, you kind of, it's easy to get immersed in and go oh my God, is this real? Whereas, ones maybe As Above, So Below, which is a good film, but it could work just as well without being a found footage, really.
Yeah.
So
I will hear no slander on that film's name. No, I know what you mean, especially because I heard that, Terry. I mean, we can talk about that later. But
without being heard.
we can talk about that a little bit later. But it's such a high level of production value, and I think sometimes high production value does a disservice to found footage, in my opinion.
Definitely, and I mean, I think of something even just mainstream kind of access to all these things as well. I think of something like the Poughkeepsie tapes. And I remember
the Poughkeepsie tapes.
When I first found out about that, it hadn't been released. It was kind of very quiet about it. And I ended up seeing it on YouTube, and it was this kind of low rent version of it. And it was the best way to watch it, because it's is this a documentary about some sort of serial killer or something? Now I have the Blu-ray of it, and I've watched the Blu-ray, and because it's a Blu-ray put out by a big company, you're a little bit more disjointed from it. Whereas when you watch it this way, it just feels oh, what's this, It's the same for it's your friend passing you a bootleg videotape or whatever, what's going to be on that?
I watched the Poughkeepsie tapes, and I downloaded it in a way that in a particular way, and I watched it that way, which also made it feel oh God, did I just download a snuff film? What did I do? And also I had heard of that movie, I think in 2007 was when it was coming out. And I was trying to find it for literal years because it had such a weird, tumultuous release history. Mm-hmm. So when the hype had built up, I was finally going to find this holy grail of weird shit, and it paid off. I will say, it definitely lived up to the horrifying hype.
What I was thinking about was, okay, so I love the idea of found footage in this aspect of watching a crappy copy on YouTube, or downloading it through nefarious ways or whatever the case may be, because it kind of reminds me of back being like a kid and finding like a VHS tape that might not have a mark on it. You know, it might have something on it. It might have something scrawled in like, you know, with felt tip marker on it that like, it's like, well, I'm going to put this in and it could be with the movie that you're expecting to watch, or it could be something different because someone taped over it. And so there's that sort of like kind of a little bit salacious, a little bit like dangerous feel to it that, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast a couple times now, where it's like we don't necessarily get that feeling anymore because everything is so mass marketed and produced and clean to the nth degree. So like when you find something like a car driving by my window, right, as I'm trying to give out some information,
that's the scariest shit of all time.
I know it is. When you when you find something like the Poughkeepsie, however you say it, tapes.
It's a really annoying name.
It really is. Or like you watch something that looks like it could have been filmed by some random person. It kind of, that's the kind of stuff that like I find myself more pulled into when it comes to like found footage, I think, because of that.
I always think of things like the McPherson tapes, which I only actually watched recently for the first time.
Yeah.
Like,
I saw that for the first time this year.
What's that? Like the first half hour of that is just like a birthday party or whatever. I mean, you know, birthday party and the lights go out, you know. And that's what I love. I mean, that kind of found footage draws you in because you don't really know, like, is this real? Is this going somewhere? Now, obviously, when the shit aliens show up, you know, it's kind of a bit different. But
that's not a normal birthday party in Ireland?
Well, you guys don't have little green men over? I think you guys call them leprechauns. I'm not too sure. But yeah, so like when I, like, say with In a Stranger's House, like I like that kind of slow burn to a certain degree. So that's kind of the approach I went with that. And say again, things like Willow Creek has that because Willow Creek is, you know, it's supposed to basically be this tape from a camera that they just put onto a film. So literally you'll have take after take. And a lot of things you have like the half-hour long scene in a tent where they're just listening to noise, that kind of thing. I mean, I think that's really immersive because then you're listening, you're watching, you're realistically trying to figure out, wait, what am I exactly seeing here? You know, it's a lot better than like a film. And again, like I love George Romero, but Diary of the Dead is a very like hand-holdy kind of film. It's, you know, it doesn't feel realistic, you know?
No, it does not.
Yeah.
As you get older, you know, sometimes it can be harder to kind of be immersed in horror films to a certain degree. Like that little bit of blurring the lines between reality and fiction kind of helps an awful lot, you know? And I mean, I guess it's a nicer way of doing it than having like the Faces of Death style, you know?
Well, and like, I just feel like so many people who critique found footage say things like, oh, you can't see anything. Oh, nothing happens. It's boring. I don't think they come to found footage the same way that we do. I like, because similar to you, Richard, I come to it with like, I love the build. I love kind of feeling like you're part of this family or this couple or this person and you're somehow getting sucked into their life. And it's really creepy in that way of like being a voyeur into someone else's like home videotapes or their own tapes. And I think, again, I love Paranormal Activity 1 is obviously like very low budget, like done pretty. And they go up in production value as they go along, and we can have an hours-long conversation about that. But I think because found footage is such a like relatively low-budget technique, I think doing it in like a high-quality way takes away from that reality, from that creepiness. Like I almost feel like watching a found footage movie on a big screen almost takes away from that. I mean, like Blair Witch probably not, but I just feel like watching things like Cloverfield and stuff like that. And I mean, I really liked Cloverfield too, but I just think these high production value CGI like additions to found footage are not always like my go-to preferred.
I think the more money you see put into them as well, like, especially when they're going to be big theatrical releases, they're a lot more inclined to be a lot more like a normal studio film in terms of their beats and a script and stuff. So sometimes you see it even for kind of more low budget things. So like Blackwell Ghost, I am obsessed with those films. Like only saw them recently.
God, Richard, I just watched the first two.
Oh my god, the first one is a genius film, and like,
Isn't it?
It just came out like
so fucking good.
It just came out over in Ireland just before Halloween, and I binged them all. It was the most fun, and I'm trying to explain to my wife, like, you know, no, it's great. It's this guy, and he's sitting there and just banging, and he's just like, you know, trying to explain. I know, but you get it. I
love him though, but I love him. He's like I was just actually on our episode of Little Cuts, I talk about Blackwell Ghost 2 and how he's such a personable like character though. Like he feels like a real person that is just like a dad figure.
And he definitely, I think as it goes on, like, because the fifth one came out there, like, and I guess because I watched them all in quick succession as well, you see, like, I think 3, 4, and 5 are really enjoyable. They all kind of tie in together somewhat. I thought that when I was watching, I loved the first one. I think that's probably going to be my favorite of them, full stop. But as well, it's just so, it feels so realistic, even though it's, he's edited it down to a T. It's very professionally done to a lot of areas, but and so little actually happens. But what happens is just done so well. You feel like, oh, what is this? I thought the second one maybe suffered a little bit from, like, okay, I made a horror film the first time, now let's amp it up a little bit. You see an awful lot of things that are going on. You see things moving, furniture moving, all. I don't know, maybe it's, I really have to look into this, because when I was a kid, I was, like, obsessed with ghosts and, ghost hunting and all this kind of thing. And, is it real? Is it not real? And, as I've gotten older, I've kind of got my feelings on that, and I'm not really too driven to, like, search into those things. But I do know people who are mad into it. And, in fact, actually tying it in Stranger's House, weirdly, I got an email off someone a couple of weeks ago, and they were asking me, like, where was this house that they wanted to, they were part of this paranormal activity group, and they wanted to check out the house and check out the hauntings, so they know any more of the history. So I didn't know how to reply to that. So I decided, like,
explain to you, this is the work of fiction.
Well, I decided, the best answer is I don't know how to answer. So, and if I don't answer, then it's like, at least it ties into what they believe. So, best of both worlds.
Well, and that's what's so cool about found footage too, is like, I mean, after watching so much of it, it's like wild that people buy that shit. Like, people really do see these movies and like, that's real. And I love that. Like, it feels, the authenticity that you can get with found footage is just absolutely amazing. And it's kind of cool to see people believe in it. So, like, throw their entire beliefs into it.
Totally.
So it's just really cool.
Because you mentioned paranormal activity, and talking about, like, say maybe when a film is not so well known. I remember when that started getting buzz. I was in college, and it wasn't in theaters yet. The only way to see it was in America. You could demand it to your theaters, and I guess you get a certain amount of people prepay for your ticket and you go see it. But there was nothing like that where I was. And somehow I came across, a copy fell off the back of a truck into my DVD player. And but it wasn't the theatrical version. It was like it was a festival cut of it.
Oh.
And so I don't know if you probably know, like, the alternate ending where, and spoilers for, well, actually not spoilers because it's an alternate ending, but they both go downstairs at the end. There's commotion. She kills him. She comes back up. She sits down by the bed, and she's sitting there for like 2 days. The camera's recording her, just speeds up. And then the cops come in. She gets up. A door slams. The cops get frightened. They shoot her. I know, like, I always loved that ending because it felt like a more kind of a real ending compared, like, tied in with the rest of the film. But the film, it was a bit more, I've watched it a few times and compared it to the theatrical one. And it's just a bit more rougher, a bit more raw. So I remember the time getting it, like, is this, I mean, there was kind of like with Blair Witch, it's like, it's probably not real, but, maybe it is. And it didn't help that when I watched it, I was like, as a student, so we're in a student house, everyone else was gone out. I was in this place watching a film. Like, it was a stormy night, on a street filled with junkies. It was just like the perfect way to watch a horror movie.
Yep, that's how I watched it too. Similar. I watched it. I was in high school and I watched it. My mom wasn't home, so I snuck it and watched it in a particular way that is not paying for it. And I watched it because no one would go see it with me, and I watched it in the pitch black. My mom wasn't home, and I didn't sleep for a week. So
that'll teach us.
Okay, just one more question. I know we should move on to the other part of the podcast, but so was the production of In a Stranger's House, which is just all you? Were you a one-person production
That's
team?
what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So this is that's it. It was a challenge. Like, that was the challenge I set myself when I did it. Cause like I was saying, like, I'd burnt out on the idea of working with, like, other people basically. And, so I was just doing it. It was just me by myself. I think the majority of it was shot over, like, whatever that was, like 3 or 4 or 5 days. I kind of, like, I cracked what I was going to do for the entire film. I did all these things. Whenever there's, like, kind of things that happen on camera that kind of go, and I do read the reviews, which is a stupid thing to do, but every now and again you'll see people who will say, like, oh yeah, it's a stupid movie where it's him and his friend off camera throwing stuff around. It's like, no. Like, this is me doing all, like, these mad camera tricks to try and hide all these things. Like, the only other time there's anyone else involved in the film, there's 2 other times. One of them is a woman at the beginning at the gate, and then she has a conversation with someone as well. And then there's the thing up the attic. Those are the only other times anyone else is involved at all in the film. And those things were actually shot a year later because I'd done most of the film and there was a tiny little bit I needed to get, but then we had this, like, massive snowstorm, and in Ireland you don't get a huge amount of snow. So when this hit and it came away, all the trees and everything just looked completely different. So it didn't match anything. I had to wait for another year to be able to get shots to match up with the greenery. But yeah, no, so I did it all myself, and I just I knew that I could, because I again, I've done other kind of films, and I love found footage, and that's the thing is, when you do a narrative film, there's a lot of sort of certain cinematic language, whereas if you're doing found footage, it's all becomes very subjective. You're the camera, you're forcing people to look a certain way. So it becomes it's nice to be able to kind of you move away from the doll, you look back and it's gone, I mean, that kind of thing is kind of very fun, because, you take the power out of people a bit, the cinematic contract is broken,
Mm-hmm.
For this, I took things I'm a huge fan of Robert Wise's The Haunting, and I took an awful lot of influence from that idea of noises in the house, but not necessarily seeing anything for it. And then for towards the end of the film, there's it's basically a 20-minute sequence of waking up, hearing noises, banging on the door and all this kind of thing, running outside and coming back in, and everything all the shit starts happening and all that. Chairs blocking doorways and stuff like that, doors slamming shut and all. But the fun thing for me was that that's one 20-minute sequence in the house. But, that's actually made up of all these little parts that I just kind of planned, where I was going to hide my edits to be able to kind of stop the camera, put up this pile of chairs and, turn the camera back on and turn around and, go, oh no, there's chairs in the way. So that's it. And I don't think you need to kind of have some huge kind of big production value to kind of have some of these little thrills in it. And then when I was going, again, when I was doing it, I also love a film that has these kind of little creepy things going on. Mike Flanagan did a lot of it in The Haunting of Hill House, where, there's all the people standing around in almost every shot. I've always been obsessed with that. Say, The Woman in Black has a lot of those, or there's that one in The Conjuring where the mum's walking through to the kitchen and there's just a kid in old time garb just standing there, but you just don't notice him because of the way the camera moves. I'm obsessed with that kind of stuff. So there's loads of that in the film. And in fact, someone on a found footage Facebook group was saying that they liked the film and all that, and they were trying to find some of these hidden things. I specifically gave them a part of the film where there's one of them hidden in to be able to find. And I know, I guess maybe I hit it too well, because I think she couldn't see it because her TV colors were a weird way.
Well, now I'm going to rewatch and look for all that stuff because that's amazing. Okay, we have talked ad nauseum about found footage. We should probably get to the movie that you brought today. Richard, what movie are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about Poltergeist 3.
The ultimate skyscraper is having some problems.
Well, we'll get those problems before they get us, right?
With its heating. With its elevators. With its pool. Don't be alarmed. There's a logical explanation. Poltergeist 3. Rated PG-13.
Woo! Okay. So, physically attuned youngster Carol Ann is sent to live in Chicago.
That.
I know. Is sent to live in Chicago with her Uncle Bruce and Aunt Pat. But that doesn't mean she's escaped the ghosts. When she starts experiencing terrifying visions, her school psychologist believes they're figments of her imagination. He's a dick. But this becomes hard to believe when ghostly foes start inhabiting the mirrors in her relative's high-rise apartment. Okay, Richard. Tell us about this movie. Tell us about the first time you saw it, how old you were, what happened. Tell us your horror story.
So again, it was kind of around that period of, I was probably something like 7 or 8, 6, 7, 8. And that's when I saw all things like Poltergeist as well. I remember seeing Poltergeist and being scared shitless by it. And then, of course, that meant I had to watch 2 and 3 as well.
Of course.
And I think 2 is probably the reason why I never wanted to get braces. But then with 3, it always stuck with me. And I remember I must have only seen it once when I was a kid, but there was just these 2 scenes in particular that really, really stuck with me. And one of them is the puddle in the garage when Carol Ann's standing on these hands, grab up and pull her in, and then, Donna and Scott come down and try and pull her out of it. I guess maybe for a kid's mind, kids run around and play in puddles and shit like that. And, especially where I was, there was an awful lot of puddles, and you kind of go oh shit, is there something going to reach up and grab me out of that now? That really stuck with me. And the other one that stuck with me that I think probably had even more of an effect on me because I was too young at the time to really understand it, because the film confused the fuck out of me when I was a kid.
It confused me as an adult, so don't worry, we'll talk about that.
But there's this whole thing of, in the film, when Donna and Scott, they get taken over to the other side, but you think that they've come back and they're helping, but it turns out no, they're not. They're actually spooky Donna and Scott. And the way it's revealed is they're like walking along back towards the apartment, and they're only in the reflection in the mirror. They're not there in the real life. And then they, badly ADR'd in is, they thought we were real. But
the ADR in this movie, there's a number of them, and the moments always kill me. But okay, so I'm curious about this second scene with Donna and Scott, because I have my own experience with it. So I want to know, you say that that's the scene that you remember the most. What about it, I guess, kind of terrified you?
I think what it was is because as a kid, I just didn't really understand what was going on. It's like, wait, no, they came back. Why were they different? And then, because she's the sister, she's supposed to be kind of, and initially they seem like, they're the older, almost like older siblings. They should be protective and, it should feel like a safe space. But then it's suddenly kind of on a dime, it changes and they're not. So, suddenly my entire expectation as a kid is like, wait, these ones who were protectors are suddenly, they're like the malevolent force. I think that's what really got me. And I mean, I've been always fascinated with the whole idea of like, control and uncontrol and like identity loss and things like that. I come back to that an awful lot where, something is out of your control or something is in a way you don't expect. And I mean, I guess it comes back to the whole talk of, the masks that people have and all. Mm-hmm. Maybe that one just did a good job of like, who these characters are. The film spends a good portion of time showing them goofing around, like going into the store and getting booze and play, like, having a laugh with their friends. And then, then suddenly it's like, oh, actually, shit, they just killed a man.
That scene, watching it as an adult was really interesting because it's like the first time in a Poltergeist movie that a character is like violently murdered.
Yeah, it's the entire film is a bit weird in general for a lot of firsts or a lot of non-poltergeisty kind of things.
Yeah, true. But also the puddle scene, going back to that. So I can imagine how visceral that could be, like the idea of like puddles. Did that ever affect you after watching the movie? Were you ever afraid of puddles or something? Like I remember kind of steering clear of them or looking at them going, that's a portal to the ghost world. So I'm just kind of curious if that also affected you at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I mean, I don't think I had too much of like, I mean, the logical part of my brain, even as a kid, would kind of go like, no, like, I mean, that was just a movie and all, but what if, And, there's like where, especially back then, there was an awful lot of kind of crappy roads. So there's a lot of huge potholes, like huge puddles in them. Mm-hmm. So you'd all like, it wouldn't feel like it was out of the realm of possibility. And I mean, when you're that age, I mean, quicksand is a serious concern in your life, So, I mean, Why can't puddles follow suit?
We just talked about that about quicksand with Princess Bride. Yeah, that's yep. that was a genuine fear. And why not puddles? I mean, the special effects in that scene though with the puddles is actually really, really good. I think even though like, you can kind of see the way it's like made now, I still think it's an effective sequence.
Yeah, definitely. And like the entire film, like, the film itself is kind of shite, but the actual stuff with the effects and like an awful lot of especially as it gets to the second half of it, it does an awful lot of cool stuff. Like I was looking at it earlier on, and I was thinking that if it took itself a little less serious, it probably would have been a hugely like fun, goofy 80s movie, like with all the crazy visual effect or crazy like creature effects and rubber hands and all. But it's all the work with the mirrors. Like I don't know about you guys, but like when I saw it, especially as a kid, like I mean, mirrors are a bit weird enough because it's suddenly like, who's that person? Oh, that's me. But, that film suddenly means like, oh, it's me. But, oh, wait, is it? And I don't know how much of it like maybe seeped in my brain, but there's a couple of times in it where, you'll see people talking and then someone will like walk away and their reflection will wait a while and walk away afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's stuff like, even now, like, even as a 30-something-year-old, I'll be going into the bathroom and I'll like, okay, maybe don't make eye contact with the mirror in case it decides not to make it back,
Right. I think that's like I think there might be something like ingrained in us about mirrors because of that. Because like I remember being terrified of mirrors after this movie because like I was afraid that it was like actually going to pull me into some spirit world. Mm. Well, the thing is like, okay, I've talked about this before, but like I had a very overactive imagination as a kid. I grew up in Alaska for like my first formative part of my young childhood. So because of that, because of the isolation of where I was at and because I was an introvert, I did a lot of like, I played around a lot with like in my imagination world. Like it wasn't like I was like, it's not like I had an invisible friend or whatever, but like I definitely like would slay dragons with a sword or whatever. Like I was like creating these fantasy worlds. And I've mentioned this on the podcast, I think when we were talking about Salem's Lot, about how I'd watch scary movies and I would, use information from that as sort of like my arsenal to like fight them if they ever happen in the real world. And so the scene that when you're talking about that affected you as a kid, for me, it's the one scene that I remember about this movie. Going into this movie, I didn't remember anything about this film except that the fake Donna and the fake Scott. The only way I could tell that they were like not real is by squinching someone's face. Because that's what he does. Like after they have their makeup session, he like grabs her cheek and like rips a chunk of it off. And I'm like, oh, that's how I can tell if someone is actually like a spirit them or if they're real.
It's really kind of Scooby-Doo, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, right. So I have this vivid memory of walking up to my parents after seeing this movie and like pinching their cheeks to make sure they were real.
God.
Because I was like, if I pinch and the skin comes off, I know they're fake. That's
a very brave way. I just went the other way and went like, yeah, no, I mean, everyone is definitely an evil spirit, so I'm just going to steer clear.
I mean, like I was prepared. Like I went into these movies thinking, oh, this is going to give me ammunition. I know Freddy's weaknesses because I've seen all the movies, so I know how to kill him if I need to. And now I know how to tell if this person is a ghost or not. Like this is how my mind was working as a kid.
No, great. Listen, you can't fault that logic, you know?
Right?
Oh man, I love it. Goes right on the resume, you know? Demon prepared.
Yep. 100%.
Well, maybe that's why I don't get jobs, because I always go in and I just squeeze their face and like they're like, what the fuck are you doing? And then, you know.
Skin still intact? All right, we're good.
Well, they're good for me, but like
off?
I'm out the door.
Yeah.
So this is the first time you saw them, right, Mary Beth? Because you've only seen the first one.
I've only seen the first one, and the first one ruined my life. It was the film I talked about when we first started the podcast. I think I saw that movie and then never wanted to experience anything like it again. And also, I've talked about this a million times before, in that like I was a little shit and didn't really think franchises were worth watching. I just wanted to watch the first one and like ignore the rest of them because there's no way they could be good. I have learned my lesson, everybody, as you guys know. This is not necessarily good, but I liked really it. Like, it was okay. Look, it makes no sense. It's narratively kind of a garbage fire, but they do some really cool shit, and that redeems it a lot to me. Like a lot of the effects, and then the comedy is very strange in this movie too. Like I know, I think Richard, you said this about like, it could have been something very, if they didn't take themselves so seriously. Like the comedy in the beginning is really funny. Like they could have leaned into that a little bit more. Like
think about it, like, yeah, every now and again you have these weird slapstick moments, like when Scott comes out of the pool all frozen and like he fucking snots himself on a window, like, you know.
Oh my god, that actually made me jump, I will admit. And then like Carol Ann's joking at the beginning about making toastums and making breakfast and like, I don't know. A
woman's entitled to change her mind.
Right? Like there was just some really cute moments that I feel like
you're so declassé.
Yes, like should have extended throughout the movie, because those were the really endearing parts, I think, to me. And like seeing her grow up.
All the funny characters kind of disappear halfway through, you know? I didn't even realize you really left, like, was it like Nancy Allen and Tom Skerritt for an awful... And I mean, like, they're madly watchable, but Jesus, like...
They're boring. Their characters are boring.
So that's what I was talking to Terry about this. I was like, this feels like a movie that was an anthology film, but not, like, did not mean to be an anthology film. But it kind of is. Like, it's presented like vignettes, because the focused character changes so much. Yeah. Like, it's jarring, because it goes from Carol Ann to Donna to the parents. And I'm like, wait, whose story is this? Like, I am very confused about who I'm supposed to be, like, really caring for and rooting for.
That's it.
And then, like, Zelda shows up for, like, 2 seconds, who I love. Zelda Rubinstein.
Yeah. Well, she really does. She just kind of really shows up just to kind of have the name on the poster, doesn't she?
Well, I do think that sort of, like, legacy... That Poltergeist legacy kind of like hurts this movie a little bit, because there's like, it feels almost like they have to have these moments. Like they have to have Carol Ann getting sucked into something. They have to have like, this time it's like a puddle instead of the TV, but so you have to have that. You have to have Tangina coming in and saying her mysticism. You have to have, like, I mean, it was established in the second one, this preacher Cain. You have to have him like come back because he was so successful in the second one. Like it's this mythology, I think, that it almost starts to like crumble on before we even can get started.
I know that Dr. Seaton's whole thing, his whole thing in it is the fact that there's the whole mass hypnosis kind of thing. But it's such a weird thing. It's like the amount of times people just really ignore something that's weird going on. Like when people like, the reflection walks away after the person's actually walked away, or like, Carol Ann like pops her head in and says something to Donna, and then in real life pops her head in and says something. It's like, would you not go, wait, hold on, there's something weird going on? Or when the hand picks up a coffee cup and throws it at a mirror and all. Like,
yeah.
Okay, these are a little bit more like on the nose, yes, but like I'm immediately thinking about how I have jokingly posted on Twitter twice now. Once about how like I saw something in the doorway when I was sitting at my computer desk, and then I kind of did a double take and there's nothing there, and I'm like, there's a ghost. Or the time when like recordings show up on my phone at 2 a.m. and like they're just these weird audio recordings. So, and I'm just sort of laughing him off, like, ha 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 ha. So, yeah, I think that, like, obviously in the film, like, if a fucking hand reached out of a desk and threw a fucking cup of coffee at the mirror, I'm pretty sure that I would probably be like, there's something really fucked going on here.
I would have noped the fuck out of there and gotten a new job. Absolutely not.
I do think there is a human proclivity to, like, have a distrust of that, whether we can take it to the same extreme that Dr. Seaton does in the film or not is another question.
That's it. Like, I mean, is he trying to help her, or is he just kind of like,
oh my God,
I'm gonna prove that you're a little shit? Is that all he's trying to do? And he fucking shows up at her house, like, what is he doing?
Okay, but after he says the iconic line,
Put dinner on a low flame, and don't forget the cilantro.
Don't forget the cilantro.
What?
Like, what is that line? It's so funny. It's so fucking funny and like out of nowhere. And it's just, that is not supposed to be the thing that sticks with me with this movie, but boy, oh boy, is it the film that's like the moment that sticks with me.
That's it. Like what I took from the film as a kid and what I took as an adult are very different things.
Very, very different. Well, and I think something that was really interesting to me about this movie too was everyone knew that Carol Ann had some kind of weird powers. Like she just came in and everyone's like, do you see any ghosts? Like everyone knew. I'm like, oh, okay. So she just came in being the weird girl. Like, okay. Like, and how do like you have those conversations? Like, how do you breach that in a topic? How do you, oh, by the way, this girl like has had some fucked up experiences with ghosts and she might be psychic.
Yeah, that's it. I guess if it was done now, they'd probably be a little bit more like she had some sort of trauma that we have to try to get to the root of, as opposed to she is a devious person who's causing mass hypnosis. I mean, like,
mass hypnosis.
He really goes for the jugular with her.
He really does. So does a teacher. The teacher's like, oh God.
And you can believe that a little girl, a little 12-year-old is somehow doing mass hypnosis, but the idea that like something could be supernatural happening is like, oh, that's just ridiculous.
See, that's my thing. I'm like, you would think that she can mass hypnotize people. That's pretty fucking weird and like supernatural and paranormal to me. Like, what's the line here, Mr. Seaton? You fucking weirdo. Anyway, I have a lot of feelings about that man.
Well, and that's why he gets to be the one character that dies in these movies, right? Because like he gets like fucking pushed in down an elevator shaft.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
And decomposes very, very quick.
Right? I know. I was like, oh, someone just
Everyone does in this movie. Like, yeah. I'll be honest, the scene that kind of freaked me, well, not freaked me out, but like grossed me out a little bit was when Tangina, I guess, dies and turns into the zombie skeleton of whatever she is.
Oh,
and then Donna like crawls out of her.
Claws her way out of her. That was so
chunky
good.
and gross.
It's so gross.
When the hand, like I had to rewind it when the hand's like coming out of the face, and like then all of a sudden it's like coming out of where her breast is, and like just pulling out, and she's like gasping for air. I'm like, this is nasty.
Well, and it's
gnarly.
Parallel to the first one where they come out of like they are birthed out of the womb of the spirit world, the vagina ceiling, and like are covered in goop and take the shower. I was like, oh my God, this is 100% like enacting that part, like that iconic scene from Poltergeist.
Kind of going off of that, I also thought it was interesting that that Scott gets birthed out of the swimming pool and he's covered in like white goo, like it's very seminal. Like just like goopiness like on him, and I'm like, this is it was bringing to mind the sort of like goopy ending of the first Poltergeist, but then it was also like very semen. I mean, it was gross looking. It was like really gross looking semen.
And then just like falling around the place, not knowing where he's going, definitely ties into a little bit of,
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, can I shift the conversation from semen to family? So actually, no, semen and family kind of go together.
What a segue.
Look at that segue.
Speaking of semen, family.
Speaking of semen, family. Well, something that I actually really enjoyed about this movie was the representation of a mixed family. I feel like, so Aunt Trish is the stepmom, and she is also Carol Ann's aunt. And then there is Tom Skerritt's character, who is Trish's new husband and like step uncle. And then there's Donna, who is stepdaughter, step cousin, whatever. And I really I guess like I'm so used to in horror movies where like the mixed like the stepmom is evil, and this was a very interesting look at like a cohesive like a different kind of family unit that is like there's a daughter, but then there's a niece, and then there's a step parent, and it's just a very interesting way of looking at that. And then also versus like, there's the moments when, since Pat isn't technically a mother, she's allowed to say fuck that brat. Like she multiple times says like fuck them kids, and is like, we're leaving her here, which is such a contrast to the first one when the mom is like very much like, I must get my child. Meanwhile, Trish is like, I'm saying Pat and Trish interchangeably here, but she's like, absolutely fuck not. Our life is good enough without her. I'm like, damn, get her.
That was something that like I did think was an interesting contrast to the first one, because you do have the sort of like motherly love of, well, there's a lot of contrast between the characters, right? Because you're talking about a biological mother versus a stepmother. You're talking about a woman. The original mom was a housewife, and Pat owns a gallery that's putting on a $26,000 worth amount of postmodern neo-abstraction at her fancy high-rise gallery.
Very quick side note, I thought they were going to come to life at some point. I was so looking forward to something possessing that art and having it come to life, and it didn't, and I'm very disappointed.
Did you see the mannequin thing turn in the opening, like, beginning part? There's like a scene where she's like sitting in front of the, there's a scene where she's sitting in front of like the mirror, and it's before everything like spooky starts to happen. But like, it's like, I think it might be the first moment that we actually see like something weird happening in the mirror. And it's that really weird mannequin-esque type thing that's like sitting behind her, and it like turns its head. There's like a moment where it turns its head.
Okay.
And it's such a little, well, it's really subtle. And I just managed to catch it at like cause there was like a sound note that like cued it in, so I like rewound it, and because I wasn't paying attention at that point.
But that film, it has an awful lot of set pieces all the way through. Like, but when you compare it as well to the first one, I think there's probably something in the fact that like is Stephen in the first one is like he's a realtor selling houses, and in this one you have Tom Skerritt's character like managing a huge high rise as well, like it's also residential buildings.
Yeah,
it's very strange when you think about the fact that Aunt Pat, she should be the one who's probably a little bit more connected to Carol Ann because it's her sister,
right?
Her sister's daughter. It's a biological connection. Whereas it's absolutely Tom Skerritt's character, just all the way through, who's really like no, we have to be looking after her. She is family, and it's interesting to see that dynamic. And I mean, I kind of felt like her hatred, like she kind of seemed to like piss on Carol Ann kind of out of nowhere, really. But at the same time, it's like you were saying though, like talking about the family dynamic of it. That is kind of interesting. That the fact that as someone who's looking after someone else's kids, it kind of puts that human element of oh, you're my family, I love you. We're going to make sure you get to school on time and all. We're going to run down the stairs and all. And then also like you're such a shit. You're burdening my life. You're making things really tough. So, when you don't have that literal, like, you're not actually my kid, why am I having to go through all this because of you? But, and then she has to like, kind of claw it back. And at the end, she kind of goes like, no, we love you, come back and all, which, I mean, it's a very strange ending because like, it's only a couple of minutes before where she's in and like, they think that they've cured, like settled everything. And she kind of goes like, well, let's fuck Carol Ann out of here.
I know. Pack her bags and go, bitch.
There's a couple of lines that I wrote down because she's like, I love you and Donna, let's get out of here. Should never have let Steve and Diane send her to us. Or then later, just a little bit later, she's like, let's pack up everything that belongs to that little brat and send her back to my sister. Like, there's all of these there's little stuff like that I'm like, wow, this is really antagonistic. And then by the end of it, we're supposed to believe, I know I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to talk about my feelings is basically like how she says it when the fake Carol Ann is. Like, what is this fake Carol Ann? Is it like Kane? So I was like, what do we call her? Is it like Carol Kane? Is it Kane Ann? Carol Can? like Carol Can? Like
Carol Can. I know. I was a little bit confused about that too. Well, and there's probably something interesting to like talk about with like the ego and the super ego and id in there, but I also don't think this movie is smart enough to apply that kind of analysis to.
Yeah, that's what, like, I mean, you give it the benefit of the doubt looking at the fact that it is like, you know, a family member having to, like, you know, show your love for a family member, but where are the boundaries on that? But yeah, the film doesn't really do the legwork to get to that point. And as well, because she goes, it's literally, I think like they're coming up the stairs. It's just before they go up the stairs where she's like, you know, let's get rid of Carol Ann. And then, like, moments later, just it happens to be just after her husband's pulled in. It's like, no, Carol Ann, seriously, we love you. Like, you know, come back.
Right, come back.
I mean, like, you know, what you don't see is after the camera pulls out and you go to the wide shot of the building, she's like pulling the like suitcases out of the wardrobe and going like, okay, we're sending you home. You know,
right? Well, the thing that like I really like latched on this time is how much no one seems to like Carol Ann. Like,
I know.
Other than Bruce, because like you have like Donna, who, you know, she gets caught on the phone. She's like, I'm brat sitting, and she's not even a relative. Like, you have that kind of bitchy line, and then you have like Marcy, this one little character that's like the most annoying snot. That's like Scott's sister, and she's like, well, there's that snot Donna and her yucky little cousin. Like,
who the fuck are you, kid?
God, I wanted to feed her to that machine, or to like the mirrors. It's like, get her out of there. But like, it's interesting that Bruce. I think you kind of mentioned this, Richard. That Bruce is the only one who has like any kind of like care for this poor girl. It's
I know,
weird.
and she's been through so much trauma too. Like the first one, I didn't watch the second one. Don't tell anyone. But in this one, like this poor girl is just like cannot escape paranormal trauma. She cannot live a normal life. She's trying real hard. Like she's relatively well-rounded in how she talks to people. Like she's kind of normal, or tries to be. And then everyone's like, oh, fuck Carol Ann. And she's like, I can't help it. Like, it's not like I did not mean for this to happen to me. I did not ask for this. And they're like, fuck Carol Ann. She's too creepy. And she's like, I'm sorry. Like,
is it terrible to say I don't like her in the film either? Like, I think she's just like that kind of the snot-nosed kid, you know, the real kind of know-it-all. Like, she goes with D-Class-A, like, you know, she's insulting people with it, like, moments after she's learned what it is. But, you know...
Oh, I love it. So funny.
No real reason to hate a kid for that. But, you know, at the same time.
I'm pretty sure I would recite lines from movies. I'm pretty sure that I called people I didn't like D-Class-A. I'm pretty sure I did as a kid. Like, that sounds like something that young Terry would have said, not knowing anything of what it meant. Just like, oh, this sounds cool.
That's funny, because, like, I went around calling people Carol Ann after
just screaming the name Carol Ann over and over again until it means nothing anymore in your brain.
Oh, God.
I really like the use of mirrors in this movie, both as, like, this sort of, like, metaphor, but also the special effects behind it. But the thing that I really noticed, I guess, as an adult is the way mirrors can be duplicitous, because you have like Carol Ann in this school where she's ostensibly learning about Chopin, but there's like two-sided mirrors. And so you have the people watching her through these mirrors, and it almost seems like she knows that they're there, or she can see them through the mirrors because she's constantly like looking at them. And then you have that kind of like contrasting with Kane actually using the mirrors from like as like a cipher from beyond in the spirit world. So there's that kind of like interesting dichotomy there thematically.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. And I think like
go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
Go ahead. I refuse.
I already forgot what I was gonna say, so you go ahead. I'll get it back in a second.
I was also going to bring up just that Donna, her obsession with mirrors, you know, because like there's the line that Bruce like mentioned. He brings up the mythology of like Narcissus, and she's constantly looking in the mirror, and that sort of like becomes like a duplicitous again way of seeing it. Because like I think you mentioned, Richard, earlier, the really cool shot where she's like putting on her makeup, and Carol Ann sticks her head in and is like, oh, you look great. And then you realize the door is closed, and Carol Ann did not say that. And then she says it like a moment later. So there's like all these like little thematic things that I think are kind of interesting that I guess aren't really explored in any unique way, but they're there.
Yeah.
It's almost like almost, you're so close to making some kind of like thematic.
But that's it. Like, I mean, mirrors should really be like, they should be the, like, you know, most trusting team, because they are just a reflection of like what's happening right here and now. And the fact that, you know, you know, something's going off with it, that there's some sort of malevolence to it, is just, I mean, it's probably a very base human fear in a lot of ways, of this thing that should be completely trustworthy is not at all. And I mean, I'm sure, like, I mean, there's plenty of things when you look back through all mythology and all about these mirror, like, you know, mirror images and mirror people. And I don't know, I think the film did a very good job of playing with that kind of thing an awful lot.
Well, and I also feel like this is a film that was so close to saying something, but really just wanted to look cool. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh, this is a cool idea, but like didn't really go further into the idea that they had. It just felt very aesthetic.
Yeah, oh, it's real set piece
So, like,
driven, all right.
Yeah,
It is,
exactly.
and
it's very
practical
set-piece
effects driven. Because like this is something that when I did some digging into it, when I was looking into the special effects, every single effect in this movie, minus the lightning strike at the very end, was live and performed on stage. Just the amount of time that would have to like go into planning out these shots, it's amazing to me, because this is a movie that, even though there's no like, I would say that there might not really be a standout moment like you would get in the first one, with like either like the coffins bursting out of the ground or the really creepy ghost dog that's like standing in the hallway. There's nothing of that like over the top spectacularness in this movie to me. There are a lot of really great small effects, like ones that you even miss, like we were talking earlier with the mannequin that turns its head in it. Like there's all these little tiny moments that are just really well done, even though there's not something that to me was like a big standout moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching the film and I thought, like, you know, maybe it's my editor ahead of me, is that it felt kind of weirdly paced in general. Like like there was an awful lot of scenes of people just walking in long shots along hallways or walking from here to there. And I was reading an interview there with the director saying that because they had to change the ending, that the film started being short, and to make sure it was kind of the right length, they had to add in, or they had to repace an awful lot of things, and he feels that the pace is off. And watching it the other night, like, I definitely thought that, you know, you watch it and basically from the get-go, it doesn't really have a setup. It's like Carol Ann's there and Kane from the last movie is still around and causing all this kind of shit. And, like, you know, there's no real reason for him, no impetus for him to actually be back and causing problems. But he is there, and, you know, they set up an entire new world of rules and things. And again, it's almost like every couple of moments there has to be some sort of weird thing going on. And again, like, you know, if the film was a bit more kind of maybe tongue-in-cheek than it actually is, you know, maybe that would kind of play a bit better. But I think someone like, is it Gary Sherman, the director? Like, he's, you know, he's quite a serious director with his things. And I think the film comes across in a very serious way.
You talked about Heather O'Rourke's death and just transitioning into like all of the shit that went down with Poltergeist, like the entire franchise, and her like really unfortunately early death. Like,
yeah, so there's
Lord.
They call it like I even think that there's an episode of that Shudder show about Poltergeist.
Cursed films?
Yeah. So there's like the you know, everyone wants to talk about the Poltergeist curse, where, you know, you had Dominique Dunn, who was Dana in the first one. She was murdered by her ex. You had Julian Beck, who played Kane in Poltergeist 2. He died from stomach cancer pretty soon after filming. Will Sampson, who played the medicine man Taylor in Poltergeist 2, died undergoing a heart-lung transplant. And then, of course, topping it off is Heather O'Rourke's tragic death at like 12 years old. So there's like all of that going into it. And I did find, I don't remember, I was looking at the alternate ending of this film on YouTube, and this was a suggested video to watch. And it was a video about Heather O'Rourke's passing, of like talking, it was like interviews with people. And there was one on YouTube that was with Zelda that I absolutely love, and proves that she is like the queen, because she's like they asked her about they called it the Poltergeist jinx, and she's like,
I owe it to Heather to present her case as most honestly and lovingly as I can. I loved this child very much, and I am still very grieved at her passing. Heather died because of an undetected congenital anatomical defect. Julian Beck died from cancer in his mature years. Will Sampson passed away after receiving a heart-lung transplant. It's my understanding he had an environmental disease. And Dominique Dunn died at the hands of an extremely ill-directed, passionate boyfriend. these are reasons I do not call this a jinx. I think that it's pretty much a courtesy to put to an end this superstitious crap.
Everyone wants to talk about the mythology behind it, but like in her mind, it's like this is a little girl that has passed away.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, not a paper headline, yeah.
right. It's not some kind of like, oh, there's a curse on the show. It's no, this poor girl had a congenital intestinal abnormality that was misdiagnosed as Crohn's, and she passed away. It's not, this is real life. This isn't like some kind of like sensationalized fiction that people wanted to make it out as being.
I know. It's awful.
I am curious though what this movie is about. Because like
your guess is as good as mine.
There's a lot of things that sort of like get introduced and then vanish. Like Scott.
Yeah, Jesus. If you were watching the alternate ending, he definitely used to do better.
Yes. And like after he and Donna make out, he proves that they're not real, and then they walk off. Like they pretty much walk out of the movie. Like she comes back at the very end, but like what was the point?
That's it, yeah, Jesus. I guess Scott's another victim of it all. But that's it, like, they're so happy there, you know, it was like, again, when the credits roll, are they going like, oh shit, what about him? Do we have to go tell his parents that, like, you know, sorry, he's like trapped in a mirror, you know?
Is he somewhere, like, covered in the white goo? Well, and then I also was really confused about the end game of Cain, because, like, the whole idea was, like, we don't want him to come out into the light. And then by the end of the movie, Tangina is leading him into the light?
Yeah. I was very I thought I was dumb. I was like, did I miss something? Like, what? I thought that we wanted to keep him out of the light, but now we're bringing him into it?
I mean, that's been like the plot from the very first one, even when, you know, Cain wasn't even mentioned in the first one, but it's like, there's someone here, and you know, she's like, no, don't take him into the light, don't go into the light. And she tells a story about, you know, how there's ghosts that want to come into our world through the light or whatever. So that's been like a current refrain through these entire movies. And then at the end, she's like, oh, let's go take a walk into the light.
Yeah, like, why does she have to be so obtuse about everything, you know? I mean, like, even the whole thing of, like, what is it when she's giving the necklace over? It's like, outside in. It's like,
right.
no, just say, like, go from the outside window or something, you know? Oh,
Yeah.
man. Like, stop being weird. Like, I mean, could you have, instead of, like, you know, turning you into a mummy and having Donna come out of you, could you have, like, you know, gone like, Kane, I'll take you now, just, you know, chill out.
I love that she is introduced at a tea party with a bunch of older women, and she's like,
Queen shit.
You guys enjoy your tea. I had to go save this little girl by flying halfway across the country.
Oh my god. And the phone call on the airplane.
The phone call on the airplane. Oh my god.
It just like pulls out to this guy sitting beside her. You gotta imagine he's thinking like, oh, who am I sitting beside?
Who
what
am I
is
sitting
happening?
next to?
Phenomenal. But yeah, I just feel like this movie tried to be a lot of things and didn't really know what it wanted to be. I think it wanted to, I felt like it was trying to live up to Poltergeist and was trying too hard.
Yeah.
To be a Poltergeist movie.
Well,
and that's what I think it's about, really. It's trying to be a Poltergeist
Trying to live up
movie.
to the predecessor.
Yeah. I know it sounds mean, but I think it's true. Like that, you know, it was so unfocused besides like, okay, Carol Ann saving Carol Ann, but then even that was kind of convoluted. So just like, this is not a movie you go to watch for the story.
No.
You know what's funny though is that when I was a kid, this was my go-to Poltergeist movie.
Oh
Well,
man,
I mean, like it's cool to look at, though. You know what I mean? Like, from like an aesthetic thing, with as a kid, you probably didn't think about the story that much, or like didn't care and didn't give a shit about it.
When I was rewatching it, I was like, when is he going to pull her face off? Like, that was my thought when I was watching this movie, because like it happened so far into the film that like, in my mind, that was like the moment of the film. In my mind, I guess I had like thought over the years that it happened more, that there were more shadow people coming in from the other world, but it's literally just the two of them. But in my mind, somehow that was like what this movie was about. And I think it might've been because there's a lot of really cool, like visual, trickery with the mirrors and stuff. And it happens a lot. So like, whereas the first movie has this general like slow build over the course of 2 hours to the finale, like you could kind of get your jolts with this just by watching it from the very beginning, because there's all that little, you know, trickery and whatnot, and it's a shorter film. So that might be why I was more into it, but it's so weird that this was like the movie that I would go to as a kid.
That's so amazing because
That's
this is
so
the one I
weird.
was so scared to revisit this for so long.
Have you seen the second one?
I have, yeah. And like, I mean, the same thing, like, you know, especially because when you're a kid, certain things don't make sense, you know, the things like when Steven starts getting kind of aggro and he's got the tequila worm and all that going on. You know, as a kid, you don't quite understand. It's just like, you know, this parental figure going a bit mental. Again, that kind of thing, I guess because it was kind of confusing when you're a kid, you really just, like, it seeps into your brain in a weird way. I was terrified of all the films. And like, I mean, particularly the first one now. And I mean, if you guys hadn't talked about it, that might have been the one I would have edged towards. But like, Jesus, like, again, like, you know, the braces in the second one, even when they like go into the underground thing and pass over and you get all the kind of cool H.R. Giger effects and all. But the same, but like the second and third one, they both kind of tie into the same way for me because, you know, they're very different than the first one. I guess because they've established all that's going on. But, you know, they have all these these things, I guess, for an impressionable mind that really get on. And I have to say, like, you know, I mean, as a kid, they like scarred the shit out of me. I mean, that's why I'm talking about them. I'm not necessarily talking about them as good films, but, you know. No.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%. We've had a couple of times where we're like, this isn't a good movie now, but, like, it's scary as shit. Like, it can be scary as shit. So, like, yeah. On that very positive note, do we want to give this movie a rating out of 5?
Yes.
All right.
What's our rating, Mary Beth?
Terry, how many Carol Ann's out of 5 do you give Poltergeist 3?
So, you know, it's funny because one thing I wanted to ask both of you was, it's a joke now how many times Carol Ann is said in this movie because it is a lot. God. But do you know how many times it is said? Every time I say this, people are probably going to guess way too high. But do you know how many times it's her name is said in this movie?
I do actually know the answer.
Oh.
Well, I don't. So,
what do you think, Mary Beth?
My guess is 126.
You're very close.
Oh,
121 shit. Times.
Oh my God, I was so close.
Yeah, it seems like I guess in that number, like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but at the same time, I mean, that's like more than 1 a minute because this movie is less than 2 hours.
I was going to say, the movie is not that long.
No.
And they say it that often. Like, that's a lot of screaming.
I wonder how many.
Yeah, that is. It's 100. That's more.
It's 1.2 every minute.
That's absolutely nuts.
That's a lot of dialogue spent
of Carol Ann's
on saying her name. And sometimes, like, my favorite moment was Tangina when she's like,
"Won't you join us, Carol Ann?
Carol Ann? Like, when, like, she thinks that it is Carol Ann in the mirror. So yeah, it's a lot. And I think that kind of sums up my feelings about this movie. Like, from a practical effects, like, I was wondering what I was going to attribute to this movie, because I think from, like, just a gee whiz, golly gee whiz, like, there's some really cool camera trickery in here. This is like probably a 4 to 4.5 from the camera trickery perspective. And then you have the movie. And the movie, I think, for me is like not really good. I think it might be like a 1 or a 2. So I'm gonna say probably like a 2, maybe 2.5 for me at the most. Because I didn't like it. My little young Terry was like, I don't know what he was thinking about this film, but he loved it. But me now watching this, I was just left with so many questions. So I think. Yeah, I think maybe a 2. What about you, Mary Beth?
See, I liked it more than you did, I think.
Okay.
I think I was so enamored with the effects. I think I didn't really care about the lack of story. I was like, all right, I see where this is going. I don't give a shit about the story. And I think I was just like drawn in by that, and it kept my interest enough that I wasn't really like saying that, I still going to give it 2.5 Carol Ann's because most of the stars come from the special effects.
Yeah.
I'm glad I watched it. I thought it was a very fun watch. It's one of those movies that'd be very fun to watch with friends and you just like have on in the background. So, I mean, yeah, I think this is a solid 2.5 Carol Ann's. All right, Richard, you have the final word. How many Carol Ann's out of 5 do you give Poltergeist 3?
Well, you know, even revisiting as an adult where certain things don't hold up, it is a hell of a fun ride to watch it. And just to kind of emotional trauma I went through from it as a kid, I think I'm going to have to stick and put it nicely firmly in the middle at 3 Carol Anns.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. Listeners, how many times have we said Carol Ann in this movie? That's how I'd like to know. Or in this podcast.
This movie.
This is a movie.
I'm not taking count. So anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for joining us to talk about Poltergeist 3. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up you can share?
Yeah, so you can find me on most things at Rich M. Waters. I'm on Twitter. I'm absolutely shit at it. Like, I'm on there all the time, but tweet absolutely stupid things. But I have a film coming out soon, a non-found footage film called Bring Out the Fear. So slightly delayed with all the COVID-y business going on, but hopefully some sort of release in some form will happen over the next couple of months. And that's non-found footage. I would say, though, for people who enjoyed In a Stranger's House, I'd say just keep an eye on things that you never know. There could be something sooner rather than later with that kind of stuff as well.
Ooh. Can you tease a little bit about your new movie? What it's about?
Bring Out the Fear, I can.
Bring Out the Fear, yeah.
So that's about, it's a couple go into a forest on kind of a romantic tryst where the guy proposes to her, but she actually was planning on breaking up with him kind of later on.
Oh, snap.
So
psych.
It ends up being kind of Kramer versus Kramer. No, they end up not being able to get out of the forest, and I'm not going to go too much into details on it, but it's kind of a bit of Blair Witch and Silent Hill DNA in there with it. Someone kind of realized, I showed someone a trailer that I've cut for it, and they kind of hit on the bit of Ben Wheatley vibes to it, which is, I think, probably pretty accurate. So yeah, that's it. That's the one coming up very soon. Well, as soon as I can find where I can put it into the world.
Right.
But I'm very excited about that.
Awesome.
I'm also excited. So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with Poltergeist 3? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can talk to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.